You will not believe what your government is wasting your tax dollars on.
About $1 million a minute.
Of course, politicians say every dollar we take from you is used for something essential.
We have to target waste wherever we find it, great or small. If we take the approach that, well, you know, this one is not really add up to that much. If we took that approach with, say, extra calories in our diet or extra spending on our credit cards, before you know it, we end up extremely obese or we end up in far deficit for our own household budgets. It's no different in Congress. We have to combat waste where we find it.
Covering government, it does sometimes seem like they pour money down a big hole.
Is the most wasteful spending he can find in our country.
You paid to blow up beaver dams in Mississippi and to eliminate brown tree snakes in Guam.
So the NIH spent $2 million in research to see if using a hot tub can lower stress. Really? I think we probably could have just agreed to that.
And it gets nuttier from there.
You found that the Department of Health and Human Services spent $300,000 to see if monkeys make good decisions on cocaine.
This is absurd.
Funding studies on pizza addiction, to crafting the perfect tweet, to finding out how beer cozies keep your drink cold, and even why people date out of their league. I'm not kidding. They're spending your money on that stuff.
So this is a good one. Everybody likes to take a selfie, right? Everybody's had it. If you don't do them, your kids will do them with them, your grandkids will do them with them. This was a study of $500,000 to tell if taking selfies makes you happy. Whether you're smiling or you're frowning and you look at yourself in the picture, does it make you happy?
These studies to find out how some men or women date out of their league. We spent considerable money there, $276,000.
A study of Russia's gay men.
Oh, that would absolutely have to be true. It's so absurd. It's got to have wasted some money.
$430,556.
That's nearly 50 Oklahomans that have to work
so that we can learn
to learn about a country that doesn't even border ours.
We're spending more than $1 million to text moms to urge them not to let their daughters go to tanning salons.
And this was the $29 million worth of heavy equipment that they lost. Can't find it in Afghanistan. But we also made the decision as we were downgrading the war in Afghanistan after the last surge that we did in Afghanistan, that we didn't want the other side to have our stuff, so we blew up a lot of our own stuff. We blew up billions of dollars worth of Humvees, tanks, you name it.
Like the hip-hop flop where you're taking Katy Perry songs and you're trying to adjust them to make kids want to lose weight. We're going to waste millions, several million, $3 million on hip-hop song adjustment. Who authorized that?
Now the NIH also spent about $1 million to see if they could help people overcome their fear of dentists. Really? NIH spent almost $7 million of cancer research money to create an automatically flushing smart toilet. That's right. And here's the bonus. The toilet will actually take pictures of your derriere from the inside of the toilet bowl, should you wish to have those for posterity. $7 million for a smart toilet. How does this go on and nobody does anything? You know what we do? We flush more money down this smart toilet, we give them more money, and nobody bats an eye.
And after they spend your money, the government charges you again for signs that brag about how they spent your money.
Close to home, and you may have seen it, we call it a streetcar named Waste. It's about a couple blocks from the Capitol over on 8th Street. And it's a streetcar they spent millions of dollars on, and for years there was nobody on it, and for years it didn't go anywhere. It was a streetcar to nowhere, basically. But we spent $1.6 million on this, and basically you could see it as basically a trolley car with nobody in it. It was sort of this nostalgia. It's one thing to preserve something, but it's another to create some sort of thing that hasn't existed for 50 years and nobody rides. But that cost us $1.6 million, and often you'll see it sitting vacant or not in use at all.
Because we're so used to these horrendous numbers.
But spending $1.3 million to find out if koozies actually keep beer or cool drinks cold.
Where was it? Who did that? Which department?
It was some study. This was National Science Foundation. And they gave it to a couple of guys.
How much?
It looks like $1.3 million. Like, you know, the ideas for some of these came up, were come up with in a frat house or something. But, I mean, there's others, $5 million over 5 years to try to get hipsters to stop smoking.
National Science Foundation spent $4.6 million to study the connection between getting drunk and falling down. Now, you'd think that would be obvious. You get drunk, you fall down. But no, we had to go ahead and study whether getting drunk and falling down was something that happens. We spent $4 million if you get drunk, will you fall down? This is insane.
All right, well, how about pizza addiction? What's the story on that?
There's another. This is pizza addiction. $780,000 spent to try to find out if pizza is as addictive as crack.
Why?
We spent money studying the gambling habits of Ugandans. We've studied how to prepare the Philippines for climate change.
The government is spending an awful lot of money to lecture us about things. We're spending $500 grand a year to text people in rural areas on their phones not to chew tobacco.
But after 50 years of abuse at the National Science Foundation, we're still studying, will people eat ants to combat climate change? Seriously, that was a study. How many ants will people eat? And how many ants do you have to eat to reduce the global warming by 1 degree? It's a lot of ants.
And you paid to create this robot that folds laundry.
These programs create jobs.
Spent millions of dollars to find out if drunk fish are more aggressive than sober fish. I'm not going to tell you the answer. I'm going to let you ponder that one. Do you think drunk fish are more aggressive than sober fish? This is your government. This is your money. And this is the debt you're handing on to your kids and grandkids. And this is 50 years ago.
Senator Harry Reid wants to fund frills in his state.
A cowboy poetry festival.
A cowboy poetry festival. Some of these spending projects are so silly they sound fake.
$2.6 million was spent to train American prostitutes to drink responsibly.
Most people thought that was fake.
I think that's fake.
I say false.
You would say false.
The actual truth is worse.
$2.6 million was spent to train Chinese prostitutes in China to drink responsibly. $1 million in stimulus funds to help smokers stop smoking by giving them BlackBerry smartphones.
Somehow that one is real too.
Sending monies to countries that frankly don't even like us. We spend about $30 billion helping other countries. Well, if you were going to help your neighbor, if your neighbor was without food, would you first feed your children if you had a little money left over, or help the children next door? That's what most people would do.
Same thing last year when they were actually tracking truck drivers and trying to text them messages about eating better and healthier foods as well.
The National Science Foundation, which you'll see is a recurring theme in bad and wasteful spending, also spent about $500,000 to try to determine why rats, monkeys, and humans bite and why they clench their jaw.
Hey, look, we all want a good education for our children. We want research grants. We want innovation in science at our universities and institutions, so Alzheimer's can be cured, or cancer, or the things that we all care about. But do you really want a $1 million grant that's awarded for research to have $520,000 of it charged as an administrative fee? If a charitable organization had a 52% overhead, they would be scandalized. And yet we have institutions and universities all across America, and that is the average, 52% administrative fee. This is a culture that we need to change, and this is the law that we need to change.
The National Science Foundation spent $2.5 million to research the effects of daydreaming.
About $4.5 billion so far. With the reauthorization of the Farm Bill coming up, we've identified 10 things already that will save us at least $11 billion if we would go after them.
The NIH spent $36 million to research why stress makes hair turn gray. I'm at the age I need to know that one. I mean, really? Nobody would pay for this. If we got 100 assembled Americans and said, vote on whether or not you should spend $36 million studying why your hair turns gray, not one rational, common sense American would vote for this. And yet this Congress is going to increase the budget of the National Science Foundation by 68%.
$7 million to see if rabbits' eyes blink faster when they're on LSD.
Last year, we had some great science. There's a lot of great taxpayer-funded science going on. They wanted to study whether or not Neil Armstrong, when he set foot on the moon, whether he said one small step for mankind or whether he said one small step for a man. So it's either one small step for man or one small step for a man. They wanted to know if the preposition a was in there. So they took some money that was actually intended for a good purpose to study autism, and they studied Neil Armstrong's statement when he landed on the moon, $700,000.
When you're drunk or fat, do you get hungrier when you smell delicious food? Waste or fake?
Oh, that's got to be real.
That is real. $400,935 to study that.
And one of the other things, interesting here that you mentioned that you found, is this initiative for these USDA, standards to update some nutritional standards that really, once this thing and the way that it was implemented, led to $11.6 billion
That's
in
the big ticket item.
Wasteful spending. Yeah. What happened there?
We looked at some of the money that was being shipped overseas not too long ago, and one of the programs we found was a televised cricket league for Afghanistan. All right, self-esteem is real important, and you're paying for it, so we're going to pay for television so the Afghanis can feel better about themselves watching cricket on TV. First problem is we don't have any money. We've got to borrow it. Second problem is they don't have televisions in Afghanistan. Well, some do, but about 1 in 1,000 people have a television. I guess they're going to feel better about the Americans paying so they can watch cricket on TV. It's one thing after another. We paid $1 million for a variety program to put little songs and skits on their television. Once again, most of them don't have a TV to watch.
Over $50 billion worth of waste in just one item, and a total of $70 billion worth of waste on a single topic. And that's something that we all care about and that we all want to pay with our taxes, and that's education. For years, Americans have been paying more and getting less from our educational system. Over the past decade, national high school student proficiency test scores in math have consistently met the minimum or were below.
We spent $45 million on a gas station in Afghanistan. It serves up natural gas. You say, oh, that's great. We're lessening the carbon footprint in Afghanistan. Except for it's completely absurd because they don't have any cars that run on natural gas in Afghanistan. So they built a $45 million plant. The original estimates that was going to cost about $500,000. And it serves up natural gas that nobody has a car that runs on natural gas. So we said, whoops. And so we immediately bought them 24 cars that run on natural gas so they can go to the $45 million gas station and get their natural gas. But that wasn't enough because we had natural gas cars for them, but they had no money to buy the natural gas. So we bought them all credit cards. We bought them natural gas burning cars. We gave them a natural gas station, and we bought them credit cards.
In Tennessee, I remember one time I found that a mayor had bought his mistress lingerie from Victoria's Secret using government credit cards.
So how do we get, $500,000 spent studying Panamanian frogs? They want to know whether or not the mating call of the country frogs in Panama is different than the mating calls of the city frogs. We could have polled the audience. Are quail more sexually promiscuous on cocaine? I think we could have polled the audience.
A study that studies the way that we study tobacco products.
I would have to say yes.
$2.5 million.
Oh, wow.
A study that studies the way that we study.
And they probably funded it out of the Tobacco Trust, which is why it wasted $2.5 million.
Lizards on a treadmill. So they get the lizard on a treadmill, and then they have active X-rays to look at its joints. They were curious as to why a lizard waddles. So have you ever seen a lizard or an iguana? They walk funny, they waddle. So why do they waddle? What do their joints look like in X-rays? And so we spent, $1.5 million studying lizards on a treadmill.
Pell Grants, another example. We all think that they're a good idea, and it's great that people are. All right, but why should they charge an administrative fee to accept government money that they would normally not get? So we want to eliminate the fees. Look, you either want federal assistance or you don't.
But I'm not so sure, why we would borrow money from China to send kids in Pakistan to space camp in Alabama or to Dollywood. $250,000. We also spent over $1 million in Afghanistan doing an anti-drug program. Unfortunately, really, the drugs problems in our country, they grow it like corn. It's a crop for them. The problem is the demand comes from us. We spent $1 million on a public relations television programming in Afghanistan, and it was to convince the Afghanis not to use drugs. It was in English. So the vast majority of them couldn't understand, or, most of them don't have television sets anyway.
The Department of Homeland Security spent $3 billion on salaries for government employees who never showed up for work. Why'd they pay them for not going to work?
Basically, it was easier to pay these people not to show up than it was to fire them.
So they were dangerous, or they were worried about them, they didn't want them in the office, so they paid them to stay home.
$1 billion a year wasted every year.
That your tax dollars should not fund NFL or NBA stadiums.
We spent $90 million on a hotel in Kabul. Well, we didn't quite get finished. The contractor built about half the hotel. He built the shell of the hotel with no walls. I think he completed one room so he could send pictures home to say he was making progress. The hotel was never built. The guy ran off with like $60 million of the $90 million. The hotel still sits there. And guess what? It's a shell of a building. Our people are worried about the Taliban crawling up in it and shooting down into our embassy. So the next thing is, I'm surprised it's not in this bill. Maybe. Who knows what's in this bill? They need another $250,000 to destroy the what's left of the hotel. The guy ran off with the money, and we have the shell of a building. It's a danger to our embassy.
And to me, it's incredible what our government spends money on. For example, your report shows that almost $30,000 was spent to look into bad language used by online gamers.
The USAID spent $48 million helping disconnected Tunisian youth to not feel like, they are a problem to society, to help them cope with modern society. Now, we've decided that, I don't know why they even think they need this anymore, because I think climate alarmism has really penetrated all of our education. But just in case there's a child in the country that's not afraid that the oceans will rise and cover the land and that we're all going to drown and that the polar bears are going to drown, we need to make sure they know it through a special video game. So we spent $500,000 on a video app to try to convince our kids that the polar bears are drowning sometime soon.
Yeah, how about a multi-million-dollar warehouse that could have been built for $500,000, and it wasn't even requested to be built because after the contractors and all of that finally got around to doing it, it was no longer needed. It was completed anyway at the tune of $14 million. It sits idle, not even used to this day.
$150,000 was spent to investigate supernatural events in Alaska. They were to look at unexplained lights, animals with transformative powers, yetis, and all kinds of different mythological animals, landscape features that had special powers, and of course, you wouldn't want to leave out sea monsters.
The Denver hospital, originally scheduled at $350 million for a 192-bed facility, is now, $1.2 to $1.4 billion. You could have built the posh 80-plus story, luxury living high-rise in downtown Manhattan and bought 192 apartments for the veterans, much cheaper.
This is a good one. This is from the early 70s. Federal Aviation Administration spent $57,000 studying the body measurements of what they called in those days airline stewardesses.
The waste comes from a stipulation that within the law that requires the federal government to pay a fee to give away their money. The $5 payment goes directly to participating schools and is intended to help offset the cost of the Pell Grants. So we let institutions of higher learning charge a fee to accept your money, the taxpayers. The nation's taxpayers provided $30 billion to 8 million students. The average Pell Grant received to students was roughly $3,800. That all sounds good. While $5 does not seem significant, when you put that $5 towards 8 million students, you can see where the problem is. It is an unnecessary, arbitrary, and should be a fee that should be disallowed.
We're just not very good at it. Most of our military don't want to be policemen. They don't want to create countries that soon kill the enemy, come back home to their family. But we kill the enemy, and then we stay, and we stay, and we stay, and we build them schools, we build them roads. I mean, there are some schools that have been built 4 or 5 times and blown up 4 or 5 times by the Taliban. It's terrible that the Taliban doesn't want girls to go to school. It's terrible that the Taliban would do this. But don't the people who live there have some responsibility after we've given them $1 trillion to do something for themselves?
Higher education institutions used over $117 million in funds that could have gone to students, but instead went to administrative costs. And he says it's been that way for years.
The National Science Foundation, the king of wasteful spending, spent $100,000 to teach social scientists how to apply for grants. So it's not bad enough that we're just, handing out money like it, grows on trees, but then we got to teach people how to get more of the free money. There actually was another cache of money that went to Central American countries trying to teach them how to get more of our money. Really? We're actually teaching foreigners how to apply to get grant money from our government.
$412,000 spent on the following study. Glaciers, Gender, and Science, a feminist glaciology framework for global environmental change research. And this is the description of it. Quote, the feminist glaciology framework generates robust analysis of gender, power, and epistemologies in dynamic social ecological systems, thereby leading, this is real, to a more just and equitable science and human-ice interaction.
The National Science Foundation used $1.5 million to study how to make tomatoes taste better. They spent a lot of money, they spent a lot of time, they wrote up their report, and this is shocking. This is groundbreaking research. They found that if you add sugar to tomatoes, they taste better.
Then there is the Let's Move program. Promoted by First Lady Michelle Obama, it focused on exercise and healthier food in schools. The congressman found in 2008, by age 15, 31% of kids met the recommended activity levels. The number, he says, fell to 27% by 2015. A $7 billion program. Billions wasted, says Congressman Russell, that should have gone to students.
A CBO report came out that sets the 10-year cost of Obamacare, the health care initiative, at $1.7 trillion, as opposed to the $900 billion. Cost is basically double.
So occasionally the CBO does something that's useful. It's one of a number of federal agencies that gives the public a sense of assurance in things where there is no assurance.
Maybe instead of giving them more money, we should give them less money.
A couple of years ago, it was shrimp on treadmills that Dr. Coburn found some study. This year, we have a shrimp fight club. Duke University got money to actually pit shrimp against each other.
But they've got lizards on treadmill, they've got shrimp, they've got crawfish on treadmill.
Today, government spends your money to study the immune systems of shrimp running on treadmills.
Well, it doesn't take a team of scientists to conclude that people don't like eating food that has been sneezed on. Actually, it does take a team of scientists at the National Institutes of Health.
In the NIH last year, they spent $2 million studying whether or not if someone in front of you in the buffet line sneezes on the food, are you more or less likely to eat the food that's been sneezed on? I think we could have polled the audience on that one.
The NIH spent $2 million of your money on a study to find that children don't like food covered with sneezes.
Now look, if you want to come to me and say we should study Alzheimer's disease, I've got open ears. Heart disease, diabetes. But if you want to study whether somebody sneezing on the food makes you more or less likely to eat the food, that's just ridiculous.
I like NIH. I think they do life-saving research. And now they're wasting millions of dollars on sneeze research on food.
Researchers at the esteemed Harvard University spent $3 million to study if people were able to smell an unpleasant odor in their urine after eating asparagus.
A Harvard study on the smell of urine after eating asparagus. They surveyed almost 7,000 people of European American descent. They found 60% of people could not detect the smell of asparagus pea,
also known as asparagus pea. according to the research. The research was funded through a research grant from the National Institute of Health with your tax dollars. The NIH uses federal tax dollars to fund its research and received $30 billion in 2016.
They spent $300,000 studying whether Japanese quail are more sexually promiscuous on cocaine. I think we could probably just assume yes.
They're saying that, look, we're going to learn things about drug addiction.
That's their claim, but the fact of the matter is that no animal testing is relevant to humans in how humans react to recreational drugs. And we waste $150 million on these sorts of tests, and they have no relevance to humans at all. So it's killing animals for no reason and wasting your money for no reason.
How much do we spend in Afghanistan building their roads, building their bridges, building their schools before they blow them up again, and then we rebuild them again? We've rebuilt some buildings 7 times in Afghanistan. That's nearly $50 billion. That's about a year and a half of the penny plan right there.
How many of you would donate to a charity that had a 52% administrative overhead? No takers? Didn't think so. And yet that's exactly what you do when you have the National Science Foundation put forth research grants that were designed to help people in their health and fighting disease and many other things. The average fee that universities and institutions charge back to the federal government for these research grants is 52%.
Also in Afghanistan, there's been brand new equipment that we send over there that's shredded. They have big, huge industrial shredders. My staff saw them. They found boxes of new equipment, electrical outlet boxes, all kinds of things being shoved into the shredder. So we buy brand new equipment, it's shoved in the shredder. $50 million of brand new, never used equipment has been destroyed. This doesn't even count the old stuff we're destroying. There are reports it's $7 billion, seven with a B, billion dollars of used equipment. Tanks, Humvees, etc. have been destroyed. Why? Our allies are so unreliable, we're afraid if we leave a tank or a Humvee there, it might be taken by the opposition and used against us.
Came out with a report about paid patriotism.
Since 2013, $7 million of our tax money has gone to basically pimp patriotism at professional sporting events. So, for example, they'll have somebody from the Army come and drop a puck at an NHL game or throw the first pitch at a Major League Baseball game, or there'll be a flyover or someone from the military singing.
And we thought they were just honoring the servicemen.
Yeah, you would think, except these billionaire NFL owners are getting a couple $100,000 for having a flag fly over their stadium. It's really disgusting.
It used to be that this was all congressional earmarking. That was where most of the scandal was. Now there's very little of that, but these agencies are given money that Congress authorizes these programs, and then these agencies decide how to spend this money.
And to show you how bad spending in the federal government is, it gets faster each month as you get towards the end of the year. So when there's only 1 month left, these bureaucrats go, oh my goodness, we might not be able to spend the money fast enough. So spending in the last month of the year is actually 5 times faster than any other month of the year. In fact, in the last month of the fiscal year, not only is it 5 times faster, each progressive day it gets faster. So the last month of the fiscal year is September. September 1, they spend the money like this. September 2, like this. September 3, like this. September 4, it goes up every day because they're trying to shovel the money out as fast as they can. If they don't spend it all, they're afraid they won't get it next year.
At the end of the year, or one big CR or continuing resolution. So it's one bill with everything lumped in at the end of the year. And when you do that, it's very difficult to have real oversight over these agencies.
Some dubious spending got funded through earmarks. That spending slipped through by individual members of Congress who are eager to use your money to win votes back home.
And now we know why Americans are up in arms when they hear this stuff.
Government is so wasteful at every level that we could probably cut several percentage points of every division and department of government, and you wouldn't know it was gone.
And shame on the agencies for even accepting to do this. Isn't research. This is just absolute waste.
If you want to study cocaine and you want to study Japanese quail using cocaine and you want to know if they're more sexually promiscuous, do you know how you get approval for your funding? You call up your other buddies that study cocaine in animals, and you say, hey, I've got this great new study. Would you guys like to join in it and be my peer review committee? So it's actually the ridiculous studies that we discover, they're being voted on by people who are selected by the people doing the studies. So what they do is they select other people with ridiculous studies, and they say, we'll vote for yours if you vote for mine.
Basically, they have so many people that are signing off on the grants, and there aren't boundaries around those individuals. These grants just get signed off on because someone knows the person that's in that university or someone knows that situation, and they sign off because it's not their money.
It's a school lunch program. And you might say, well, you know, we need to help those who can't buy school lunch. So we have a school lunch program. Except for what we discovered was $158 million was given, federal money, to a Los Angeles school district. And it turns out they were buying things other than lunches because nobody was watching them. 700 pages and nobody reads it. And when nobody reads it, they buy sprinklers and buy things for themselves, new televisions for the faculty to watch.
A lot of money to the average American. Well, what happens is that money for certain promotions and certain coordination will be authorized to an agency, and then how they spend that, that's not dictated by the law, it's dictated by the agency itself and those who lead those departments and agencies.
It kind of is reminiscent going back to the Wuhan lab. People say, and this is what Dr. Fauci's been saying, Dr. Fauci says, well, who wouldn't want to study the SARS virus? Well, yeah, we should. But then again, why would we pay the Chinese to do it?
It's the same kind of issue, same kind of problem that's over and over again.
And it's akin to the taxpayers' money being flushed down the toilet.
We've got to be able to have a better set of parameters on grants.
We give money to Pakistan. We trade and sell arms with most of the Middle East that don't like us. In the war effort on Afghanistan, we spent trillions and trillions of dollars in the war effort. We've defeated the Taliban many times, and I'm sure we could defeat them again. Recently, they did a Pentagon study. It's the beginning of an audit, and they audited a part of the Pentagon. This partial audit shows that $800 million was misplaced or lost. Overall, the audit found that over $100 billion in waste was found at the Pentagon, $100 billion. Well, their budget's like $700 billion. So, you know, we're talking about a significant, over a 10%, problem.
But people say, well, we have our administrative costs, we have overhead, we have our infrastructure, we have all of these things that we have to do. Yes, and that's why we have allowed for decades the tax-exempt endowments, so that as the endowments accrue wealth and they grow, they use those resources to sustain the infrastructure on the university.
Why wouldn't we put a taxpayer advocate on there? Why wouldn't we have some sort of inspector general process so this doesn't happen? You know, we have to review this. This is an academic point. We've now discovered that the NIH was funding the Wuhan lab. So we should have oversight on what happens. That's the kind of studies that we're having coming out of here, and we don't make it any better by increasing their budget.
Until we start treating it like real people's money, or better yet, treat it like our own, we're never going to solve this problem.
Is there better use of federal dollars?
I think the government should have a budget, should have a document that says what we're for, what we're against, and how we're going to spend our money.
We have to call this out. We have to raise awareness so the public can hold them to account.